organization, particularly in response to this COVID-19. And this is Unilever. At Unilever, innovation has been the key behind its success for almost 100 years. Our keynote speaker will be discussing how Unilever Philippines has innovated to meet the increased demand for its hygiene and cleaning products, developed new ways to manage product delivery lines, and adapted to new sales and customer channels. This is just one of the stories we will hear about Unilever Philippines' strategy for responding to COVID-19. At this point, let me briefly introduce our guest speaker this morning. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Benjie Yap, is the first homegrown chairman and CEO of Unilever Philippines. Benjie graduated from the De La Salle University in 1994 and immediately joined Unilever as a supply chain management trainee. Over the years, he took on jobs in R&D, brand management, and sales, including a 3-year stint managing home care products in Thailand. In 2017, he was elected CEO, overseeing almost 100 billion pesos in sales. The company's outstanding performance made Unilever one of the country's top 30 companies and made the Philippines one of the top 10 markets in Unilever universe. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Benjie Yap, CEO Unilever Philippines.
Thank you very much, Wilson. Thank you for that very generous introduction. Before I start, I want to acknowledge special people. No? Of course, MBC Executive Director Coco Alcos for inviting me over. Thank you for the invite. It's such a big honor, Coco. MBC board member also Itos Cruz, also of SGV. I also understand Ambassador of Australia, Mr. Stevenson Robinson, may be joining us as well as Ambassador to Canada of Canada, Mr. Peter MacArthur as well. It's a big honor to be invited by MBC, and I hope that I like the format where I share a bit less and it's more a Q&A engagement. And I'm also hoping that I get to learn a bit about what maybe other companies are doing. And therefore it's good that I was allowed, I think, 10-15 minutes for a short sharing session and be a lot more time for the Q&A. So I'll start off now. You know, this, I think all of us, all of you, all of us have been going through this COVID crisis. And it's a very unique crisis because it's multidimensional. It's both a business crisis as well as a health crisis. It's a professional crisis for the business, but also a personal crisis for many of us. For people like me or you, we may have kids that we will have to guide through online learning. Some of us may have parents that we would have to take care of who are more vulnerable. We may have family members at home as well who are also vulnerable. And amidst all of this, while we navigate and cope with our own personal circumstance, as leaders, we will also have to lead our company as well. And that, I think, makes it quite difficult and quite challenging. Many of the crises that we're used to, for example, in the Philippines, typhoons or earthquakes would be a one-day event where it may spill over to multiple days of managing it. But this may go on for more than a year and already many months running. And therefore, it's really a most unique situation where we talk about navigating this crisis. Maybe I'll just share a bit of a story of how this started when in mid-March this all started for us with the lockdown. And I think one overriding theme that has gone through, that has guided us as to the actions that we would need is really to care for people, to take care of people across society and across the company. That is the single most important value I believe that has carried us through because throughout multiple days and multiple weeks and multiple months, we would have to go through decision making of things that we have never thought about, things that we've never learned in school, deciding whether we buy ventilators or not, deciding whether do you buy an ICU equipment or not. There are multiple ethical and business questions that you never learn in school. But throughout all this, there was one overriding principle, which was making sure we take care of our people, both the people in our company and the people that we serve in the communities. So there are 5 pillars that globally guided us, both globally and locally guided us. In order of priority, we said people, supply, demand, cash, and community. These were the five pillars that we talked about every day, especially in the early days of the crisis. And I was holding daily board meetings at the time that became thrice a week, that became once a week. But during that daily board meeting, those were the five agenda points that we take up: people, supply, demand, cash, and community, and in that order of priority. So the first one is about people. And in the beginning, the most important thing for us to make sure that our people were safe. And para siyang Maslow hierarchy of need, no? It was purely safety in the beginning. Work from home. It was interesting when President Duterte declared an ECQ where people were not allowed to come to work, right? A day before we even knew that, I already announced a work from home for all office-based employees. A day before that, because we were already seeing the numbers and the science and the data, and we felt that we could go all out 100% work from home for office-based employees. In a way, that's not very new to us because we have been practicing this for the last 5-10 years across different functions. Of course, not every day. Normally, we would have what we call at the time Agile Fridays, where on Fridays we were encouraging employees to not work from the office, but either visit consumers, visit the trade, work from home, or work from the customer area where you're having your customer calls. So we already have a bit of this technology, and importantly, the acceptance that you don't need to be physically at work, physically in the office, physically in the office to be in a meeting. So that was already there. Importantly for our factory as well, I'll talk about supply in a bit, but to make sure that all our safety practices were in place, the mask, thermal scan, etc., social distancing. Um, but also important, what I want to emphasize, something that we saw from the beginning, or something we were looking at from the beginning, was mental and emotional health. We were worried that this might be a prolonged issue, and therefore we were already providing for our employees online nutritionist, online psychiatric support for free for our employees actually. And we put up together a employee assistance program as well, where even family members of our employees could call up and try to tap resource should we need help on mental support or emotional support. We understand that this was going to be tough. So nung simula, it was about making sure that everyone was paid. It was making sure that even our extended partners will not have a drop in take-home pay for the first 3 months, which we globally committed. Nagsimula doon. But we went upwards again within Maslow to look at emotional health, mental health, to look at social support, to look at games for function so that they can be connecting in a different and collaborating in a different way. So it was, Maslow was right there when we were looking at it. The first few weeks, it was all survival, and later on, it was emotional and mental health. Later on, was how to collaborate and how to collaborate within a virtual environment. So people was a big part of a big part of our what we did, especially in the beginning. And I can tell you, when I have my 2-hour daily meeting, for example, with the board, the first hour was all about people. The balance forward the next hour, but the first hour was all about people. Um, but also, what I'm proud of during that time on the people side as well, we continued our hiring of our interns and management trainees even during that time. We onboarded interns during that time. We onboarded management trainees during that time. Some we've never been able to still see until today physically, but we see virtually. So it's quite unique, and I don't know what experience they are going through because it's hard to be a first-time employee and you're all virtual. So I have to interview them when I get to see them physically. But we have been continuing this even during that time. We have what we call a business week, where we look out for the creme de la creme, the top 40 students nationwide, graduating and penultimate, for a business week, 1 week program that we were doing over the past 20 plus years. We continued that online as well for the first time. So I think the resilience of being able to sustain the business while taking care of our people was really the art and science of our priority from the beginning. So that's a people pillar. On the supply pillar, I think similar to many of you, we had to keep running because we run basic supplies of hygiene and cleaning and food. And therefore, we had to serve the communities and keep running. We have a tier 1 to tier 5 classification based on the data that we have in the country, the reproductive rate, death rate, number of cases every day, etc. And within that globally, there was a tier 1 to tier 5 ranking. We were on tier 4 for the longest time, until today still actually. Tier 5 would be worse off countries than the Philippines. So each tier would have a certain requirement of how often you disinfect. Of course, the others are mandatory, wearing masks, social distancing, etc. The shuttles are there. Everyone was picked up from the house, door to door, to run our factories, unless they have their own private motorcycles or cars. So this tier 1 to tier 5 setup, I think, was really quite important and was really a big help for us from our global supply chain partners, because it helped guide us as to what are the important parameters to ensure safety for our operations. Importantly, we also have an ABCD classification for our SKUs, our stock keeping units. And we prioritize our Pareto SKUs. We could not produce the whole lineup because we had to prioritize, but we prioritize the top 25-30% of our numeric count that would represent more than 80% of our sales. That was the case for the first few months, and some that we cut off will never go back. Some will still go back, but some will never go back. It was important to be brutal and ruthless in cutting our SKUs so that we are able to serve the SKUs that are most needed by the Filipino community. Um, on demand, there was a significant shift in demand, and we had to meet weekly to understand our demand cycle, the demand signals. Some brands, some categories were growing extremely fast, Domex, Nor, Ladies' Choice, and some categories were affected because of the lockdown. Face products, Dio's product, because people don't go out as much. Thank God that we have a portfolio because it was able to balance off everything. I could imagine industries that are very challenged if you are purely within a portfolio or a sector of the society where industry where the lockdown is quite severe, like travel, for example, and tourism. But not only brands, it was also channels, as many of you would have noticed. Proximity channels, e-commerce, B2B, all growing exponentially. Proximity stores like the smaller supermarkets and mini marts and convenience stores. And then the mall-based stores were initially more affected because of the lockdown. So therefore, within channels, there was also a big shift. And lastly, within media, so brand categories, channels, and also media, where people were more consuming the digital channel, as you know. So what was a big amount of TV became TV still, but also a big amount of digital, and within digital, the different channels that they were going through. Everything was sprouting, vibrant communities, communities within villages selling eggs and meat and different grocery stuff because of the lockdown. The entrepreneurial spirit of the Filipinos was really coming out, and I was quite proud of that. So that's the demand part. For cash, it was important to make sure that cash flow was properly managed. And in crisis, as many of you would know as leaders, cash flow would determine survival for many. Now, whilst we know that we were fortunate to have a that could support us during this crisis, we were quite mindful that we have many partners, especially the smaller partners, that if they don't survive this part, we would also be affected later on after the crisis. So we put together a 1 billion peso pot of cash to help support mostly the smaller partners that we have, the truckers that where cash flow is important. Some we paid ahead of our terms. Mom and pop stores or smaller accounts that are distributor served, where cash flow was also a problem, etc. So whether it's the supplier side or the demand side, the customers we're selling to, mostly the small ones, like I said, we had to provide that cash fund to make sure that they will survive this crisis because we will be stronger getting out of this together. And lastly, community, but not
inclusive business model. And
Airbnb
Nestle is one that developed their inclusive
Hold on.
business model by
yeah, I
meeting
think someone has to go
farmers
on
and
mute.
talking to coffee farmers.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Coco. And community. We had an obligation to serve the communities that we are selling to. And in the beginning, there was that strong clamor from the grassroots. So much so that as employees, we opened a donation drive and we said we will match whatever donations employees were putting together. And this exceeded 1 million pesos from the employee base that we matched. But outside of that, we also committed 100 million peso worth of hygiene and food products that we were gonna donate and serve the communities, mostly the health frontliners that needed alcohol gels and our Lifebuoy soaps and Domix and more products, but also the LGUs that we partnered with. So practically, it's quite a long list of hospitals nationwide that we were able to send to Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao for this 100 million donation that we committed to, that we executed. Um, and like I said, this was all from grassroots as well as the company initiative. Um, it was amazing how I saw employees going out to sell the health frontliners, how they were putting together their own donation drives for different segments of the society that they were quite passionate about, whether they were jeepney drivers who were out of work because of the lockdown, whether there were the carinderia people who were again out of work because of the lockdown, whether it's the LGUs and the health frontliners that were most publicly supported. It was amazing the kind of malasakit spirit that we saw from our employee base, and the company could do no less. So that's really what the five pillars that I talked about: people, supply, demand, cash, and community. We put that together under one campaign that we called Malasakit for All. Malasakit has been a key value driver for Unilever Philippines, and we wanted this to be now for all because of the crisis that we were all facing. That was when we said 100% of our employee base would continuously be paid. That was when we said 100 million peso worth of products will be donated, and a billion peso worth of cash would be provided to provide for better cash flow across cash credit across our supply chain. So this, I think, is this has been the guiding force for us during this crisis. And I think there's a short video that we'd like to share as well to summarize all of this, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
Ma, di ako nakatulog.
Lika anak, may kwento ko sa'yo. Isang araw, tumigil ang mundo at nagsitago ang mga tao sa kanilang mga bahay. Ngunit nagsimula ang tulungan at napawi ang pangamba. Nakita nila na mayroong pag-asa dahil ang bawat isa ay nagpakita ng malasakit.
Malasakit?
Ang malasakit ay ang lubos na pagpapahalaga sa kapwa na nagpuputok sa iyo na kumilos sa tumulong. Malasakit para sa kalusugan ng bawat isa. Malasakit para sa kabuhayan ng bawat Pilipino. At malasakit para... Pero di dito nagtatapos ang kwento. Sa bawat malasakit na naranasan, naipadama pa siya sa iba, sa malinis na pangangatawan, sa ligtas na tahanan, at sa sarap ng kainan. Pag tuloy-tuloy ang malasakit, tuloy-tuloy ang pag-asa. Ito ang ating kwento. Kwentong totoo at nagsisimula ito sa'yo.
Kahit ako?
Oo.
Thanks very much, Benji, for that, for sharing your experience and also for that video. And I'd like to ask the attendees, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box. Type them in early so we can get to them. We'll try to call you more or less in that order, and we do have time for follow-ups as well. Benji, I'd like to start with, I think maybe it was the second of your 5 points, product or supply. And I remember you mentioned that face products, maybe the demand for that went down. Is that because people don't need to see each other anymore?
No, it's partly because of the channel connection, because many of our face products are sold in mall-based stores, and because malls were closed in the first 2-3 months, as you know, that channel brought down the face industry across the whole category, actually. So it's more because of the channel. Because we're still seeing this move in the supermarkets where it's open.
So for a couple of months, some people couldn't take care of their faces.
No, they could through other channels, but because the footprint was harder, it's not like you can buy a lot of good face products in sari stores, and many of them were closed by the way as well. So it's mostly that would have gone down. So people would be washing every day, I guess, would be washing less often, unfortunately.
When we talked earlier, you talked about how demand for other products went up, and I think you were sharing an example regarding a new Lifebuoy brand extension, in effect,
Right.
which came in very useful. Could you talk to us about how that came about?
So when we saw this happen, and again, right after we figured out how to take care of our people first and how to run our factories, then we said, okay, habits might change forever. There would be some new habits that people would have to get used to. And true enough, until now, we all wear our masks every day when we go out, if we go out now, right? Or if you get into the car. So there are some habits that will change every day. We have a brand Domex, which was largely focused on toilet cleaning, for example, that we've now extended to floor cleaning in flexible sprays, aerosol sprays, and lime scale cleaning. So we expanded Domex beyond the toilet because we know that there's going to be a big demand for hygiene. We also believe that we also saw skin cleansing products, soap bars, no? So Dove was selling very well. And we said that hygiene would be an important space that we would have to play in as well to serve the community. So Lifebuoy was a nice story in the sense that we were able to launch a brand in less than 2 months because of the team that was passionate to be able to serve communities quite fast. And it's not just Lifebuoy, the soap, it was a whole range of sanitizer, of hand wash, liquid, etc. So it's a portfolio imported mostly in the beginning, but also we were able to shift our manufacturing lines from alcohol-based Eskinol, where, like I said, demand for skin product was affected, to alcohol-based sanitizer. So again, the entrepreneurial spirit of our supply chain factory personnel to be able to support our marketing team to do this. Imagine being able to retrofit a factory line so that we can pivot from what was having less demand relatively to what was getting to be high demand relatively during that pandemic. So a lot of entrepreneurial spirit across the company, able to launch brand in record time, a new brand altogether in a portfolio at that, around the spirit of being able to serve the community.
How much leeway does a local Unilever like yours have to innovate with these products, to make new brand extensions? How much of this innovation that happened was really homegrown? How much was led from abroad, or even needed approval from abroad?
So actually, that's a nice question, Coco. When this all happened, I think one of the first instinct, both from our global leaders and from myself and from our leadership team in the Philippines, the board, was that we had to trust the people. So whereas before, from our global colleagues, from our global stakeholders, for example, there may be a few lines in the P&L that they would watch out for. How's your gross margin? How's your sales? How's your non-working media? How's your efficiency? Etc. Etc. There was more trust given in the sense that just show me your top line, bottom line, and cash. That's all we need to see because that's all we can absorb. 100 things are happening every day in 100 countries that it was impossible for them to micromanage anyway. That was the same spirit we had locally as well, where we were also saying, let's look at our top line, let's look at our bottom line, let's look at our cash. Let's look at the health aspects like our penetration of our brands and categories to make sure that we are just looking at the few important metrics that matter. There is no more time to look at the 101 P&L lines that we would usually look at in the good old days because there's just too many variables running. We could not even decide what to run in the factory in the first few days because you have to get DTA approval for what is seen as essential and non-essential. So there was just too many variables running. So back to your question about how much leeway do we get? Unilever typically has been quite locally rooted. We've been in the country for 93 years now. Very local roots. Almost all of our top brands are from local roots. Selecta ice cream, Surf detergent, Knorr, Lady's Choice, Cream Silk conditioner. These are just some of our top brands, biggest selling brands, billion peso brands that are all locally rooted. So we do have a lot of flexibility locally, fortunately, both because Unilever's DNA is quite like that, but as well as our local roots where there's a deep understanding of the Filipino habit and Filipino insights.
What do you mean by locally rooted?
When I say locally rooted, they started off in the Philippines as its own brand. So for example, Dove would be a global brand. Di ba? Nasa States na siya, you bring them in, and then you would, of course, put local execution into a very global brand positioning already. So we would have parang borrowed that or got that from our global brand mix, as we call it. But brands like Selecta, brands like Nor, brands like Nor Sinigang, dahil may sinigang sa ibang sa ibang bansa. Surf, these are all homegrown.
Oh, I'm surprised. I didn't realize some of those were born in the Philippines. You mentioned also that some products or product lines will never come back. Could you tell us what those are, and or what was the thinking behind knowing either there's not going to be a market for this anymore, or we won't have time or resources to do this anymore?
I think the primary driver is more of so it's not a brand that will not come back, but SKUs. No? So within a brand, you would have potentially 50 SKUs, 60 SKUs, no, stock keeping units. And within that, typically you would have the top 30% of SKUs represent 80% of your sales, for example. We would innovate, and some would be successful, and some would not be as successful. Some would remain tail. But we had to be very ruthless in the beginning because the factory just could not accept all those changeovers during the crisis, as you know, as everyone is affected. So some of those tail last 5% of the numeric count that might represent 1% of our sales may never come back. But some will still come back, of course, because the factory now has the flexibility after the first couple of months of challenge. But I think that the point there was the ruthlessness in the beginning to be choiceful, because we could not produce all SKUs that we would have in the beginning.
Well, I guess previously some of those end of the tail products, you're willing to keep them on, but now you don't have the. Well, I guess you just want to be more focused now.
We have no choice but to be more focused, actually, especially in the beginning.
Two questions from the audience, and my colleague Roxanne will be helping me there. But I'll call first on Tina Tan, who is of course our
my good friend Tina.
And I think
Hi,
a lot of this.
I also see
she must be
on the list, actually. Hi, Tina Reina.
Hi.
Tina must be seeing the other end of this conversation. Tina from Suising. Tina, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for Benjie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tina.
Okay.
Yes, hi, Tina.
Hi, Benjie. I always, as a company, we always learn a lot from the sharings of Benjie. So thank you for today. Now, my question is, during this pandemic, I see that Unilever has a lot of initiatives on going straight to the consumer, whether through your own, through a lot of different platforms. Is this going to be a trade channel that is going to stay after the pandemic? Do you see the Filipino consumer online shopping habit for groceries stick after the pandemic?
Thanks, Tina, for the question. And always good to engage with Suising as well for these occasions. We believe that the online habit of consumers would dramatically change because of this pandemic and because of the lockdown. So we believe that there will be indeed a habit shift by consumers to online platforms, whether there will be Viber communities, whether there will be the online platforms of supermarkets, or whether there be the pure play platforms like Lazada and Shopee. So this, I think, would be a habit that we believe will stick. And as to how significant that will be, only time can really tell.
Tina, do you have a follow-up there?
No, thank you. That's all. Thank you, Benjie. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks very much. Benjie, could you talk a little bit about? I suspect, for those who don't know, Suising is one of the biggest, I guess, distributors for products in the country, FMCG type products, if not the biggest. So that's why they have a strong relationship with Unilever. I suspect they're not one of those that needed the 1 billion cash assistance. Could you tell us a bit more Benjie about how you needed to help and how you did help both your suppliers and also some customers of yours, distribution on the distribution side, with that 1 billion.
Right. No, so some would be from the supply side. Some would be, for example, our truckers. There are some smaller truckers. There's some big ones, but there's some small ones where if you would have, let's say, 30-day terms and 60-day terms, it was impossible to wait that long for you to pay them, given their cash flow crunch. So for those, we made some exceptions. For our distributors, they would have their own customers, the sari-sari stores or the groceries that our distributors sell to, that also for a variety of reasons could not pay on time. Partly because of the cash crunch, partly because of just operational manual systems that did not go digital right away. And therefore, we also had to extend the terms naman there. So for suppliers, some we paid earlier than what we were obligated to. And for the ones we were selling to, some were paying us later than what they were obligated to. But this was on a case-to-case basis. And mostly, like I said, focus on the smaller ones that needed it the most, the small and medium enterprise ones needed the most. So these would be the smaller groceries that our distributors were selling to, some mom and pop sari-sari stores our distributors were selling to. That would be kind of the focus that we have. And because if we did not support that, our distributors would be challenged on cash flow, right? If we did not support that as well. And it was very important for us to remember that we wanted to be strong coming out of the crisis together with our partners, not just ourselves. Only then can we really be able to serve the communities properly.
Could you tell us again, maybe I missed it, how quickly you put that program in place to help suppliers and distributors, and also how quickly and how you learned from the ground that you needed to put something like that?
I can't remember the exact time frame now, but I would imagine the first 2 weeks we were purely focused on our people and our supply. The first 2 weeks, what we were allowed to produce of the lockdown from mid-March.
So, but after the first 2 weeks, you began to get that picture.
Yeah.
To look at.
So after the first 2 weeks, we begin to get that picture that cash flow was not only important to us but also to our partners. That we were seeing this.
Thanks very much. Roxanne, shall we go to questions?
Yes, Coco. Miss Ambe Tiero, the Senior Managing Director of Accenture, has a question. Miss Ambe, go ahead, please.
Hi, Ambe.
Hello. Hi, Benji. Great sharing today. Thank you. I think it's very impressive how you pivoted the business throughout this challenging time. So I have a couple of questions. One is about purpose. I think Unilever is one of the global organizations that have been very clear on your purpose. So my question is how important would having that clear purpose play in terms of decision making? You know? And then the second question is you talked about the proximity channels. How did your approach to innovation and technology enablement change? And how much of that is globally driven versus local? That's it.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks, Ambe. Good to hear from you. Purpose is the heart of everything we do, and we each and every employee has to go through a purpose workshop to understand what your personal purpose is. My purpose that I finalized was betterment of self through betterment of others, where the belief was as long as we're able to make others better, that was a fulfillment to myself and a betterment for myself in itself. That was exemplified in our top priority of taking care of our people during that time, and it went to, like I said, went to different levels within Maslow. In the beginning, we just want to make sure people get their salaries. At first we said, okay, may factory that we're producing personal care products, for example, and personal care products in the beginning was not allowed to be manufacture in the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I think. We were allowed to manufacture food products because that was a priority by the DT at the time. So Knorr, Lady's Choice were able to produce that. But personal care, we were not running. And then we were discussing the board. We had to make sure that our employees are still paid, even if they're factory personnel that could not work from home. The office base can work from home and they're still to get their salaries, but the factory personnel could not. So we easily decided in 2 seconds to say, of course they have to be paid. And of course, the partners have to be supported as well. Our third-party partners have to be supported as well. So we also work with the partners that we had who contracted third parties that were supporting us, and to make sure that are you supporting your employees, and if not, what partial support can we give so that we can share this together. So the first part was about making sure that employees are paid. So practice survival, I guess, within Maslow. Um, and then after thinking about that as part of our purpose, then we said it cannot be just us. It should be our partners as well. That's where cash flow was also discussed for our suppliers and our distributors and our customers. And then we said our community have to be supported as well. That's when the donation that I talked about was also there. So whereas purpose, I think, took on a quite sustainability angle, sustainability lens in prior to the crisis. It was survival for ourselves and our partners in our community in this COVID crisis. But that is still core to our purpose, where we want to make sustainable living commonplace. That was our purpose as a company. We want to make sustainable living commonplace, and at that point was survival. And we said, if we are the company that is known for purpose pre-COVID and sustainability, if we take care of our people and our communities and our partners, then we would be really truly living our values. And that's where really we put our money where our mouth is. The donations, the ventilators that we bought and donated so that our employees could have access to them when it's needed later. The care packages that we sent to our employees, the online psychiatrists that we provided to our employees. Even we have monthly gift packs that was normally given again pre-COVID, that you can just get from the company store. We had to pivot to an online option so that people can get their grocery packs or the Unilever packs to their homes. So we had to pivot that also to a digital solution to be able to serve that part. So I think whereas purpose, I think, was strongly sustainability and still important up to today because we still value that. It was largely focused on survival in the beginning of this pandemic. But now it's been what 5-6 months since then, and survival is not the mode anymore, right? That was the mode in the first 1 or 2 months, and therefore now it's all going to serving our communities and ensuring that purpose is the heart of what we do. That's why we launched our hygiene brands Lifebuoy. That's why we extended our hygiene brand Domex across floors and other surfaces. That's why we ensured supply of Nor and Lady's Choice to be able to supply communities with food. That's why we were trying to keep the business alive. In the end, I believe this purpose would still be the differentiator for Unilever. That will be the reason why partners would want to partner with us, and that'll be the reason why consumers would still want to choose us. We want to be known as the company that people chose because of the purpose that we believe in, the money that we spend for that truly, and the care for the communities and employees that we have. We want to be known as a company for that. But also, lastly, we want to be known as a company that's able to convert that into a sustainable economic success as well. Because only then can you really magnify exponentially the impact that you can make to society. Now, if I go to your second question on proximity, proximity and actually e-commerce as they grew and what innovations technologies we've used, it would be very similar to many, and maybe I'll check with Ambe for something more specific. But technology, where B2B apps was important for distributors to serve sari-sari stores in a different way. So that happened during the pandemic and doing very well right now. But also our route to market distribution system to be able to serve the proximity stores. And we have an amazing supply chain network and distribution network that can reach thousands of doors to make sure that we are able to serve the proximity stores, not just the main depots or the main DCs of big customers, but also down to the grassroots. And I think that's where I think the strength of our distribution network was able to really provide us that capability to serve our communities. But I don't know, Ambe, if you have something more specific on your second question on proximity and technology.
No, I was just curious because maybe locally, like here in the Philippines, right? There are a lot of Viber reseller communities. Would a global organization like Unilever, adapt to that, for every country that you have presence in,
Okay.
or do you have a global strategy, or how much of that is
Okay.
driven globally?
Okay.
Can I
Okay,
answer?
thanks.
Can I answer first?
Sure.
Sure, Coco.
I hope not, because there are too many Viber community Viber community groups on my phone already.
I know, right?
Go ahead, Benji.
Yeah, so I think Ambe, it's a mix. There are some that are global technologies, like the B2B app that I talked about, for example. So B2B would be business to business from our distributors to sari-sari stores that they sell to. So typically, this was a global platform that we just cut and paste and adapt adapt locally. And this helped, right? Especially during lockdown, when typically if you go to a sari-sari store 4 times a month, you could not do that during the first couple of months as well. But if they would have an app that they can use, and many of the sari-sari stores, more surprisingly, are quite young with smartphones actually and that capability, you're able to provide an alternative avenue for them to order. There'll be some that are locally started naman, and that has to do with many collaborations we've had with either Accenture or Facebook or Google. So, for example, kung hindi man Viber group, because we don't initiate that ourselves, those are all organically grown from the villages, I think, and communities. Chatbots on Messenger would be one example, as well as many others, where you're able to serve in a different way. These would be locally developed. So I think the answer is it's a mix. Some have global platforms that we adapt locally, and some would be locally homegrown collaboration that typically, like I said, we would have done through collaboration with companies like Accenture or Facebook or Google.
Okay,
Coco,
great. Thank you.
I'd like to jump in, Coco, if that's okay. Because I'm interested that Ambes asked the question about the purpose. Because I know Accenture is also very purpose-driven, particularly in terms of diversity and inclusion. Ms. Ambe, I'd like to know, has your purpose been challenged during COVID, or do you find this actually strengthened during this time?
Similar to Benji's, I think it's become even more important, especially as you rally your people towards a goal, no? And of course, the way you would execute would be different. We're in different industries, no? But I think the purpose is all the more something that you need to remind your employees on, so that your actions are driven by the purpose. That's why I asked, because Unilever has been very consistent.
Especially under sustainability. Yeah, they're very known.
Yes.
So thank you, Ms. Ambe. I'll go ahead, Coco, by inviting Mr. Wilson. Sir Wilson, yes. Can you please
Hi.
raise the question?
Yeah, good morning again, Benji. I like the way how you describe purpose and how it serves the organization through this pandemic, and also the people first emphasis. But as we hope to move to hopefully a better condition, an MGCQ or whatever, how do you prepare your people in terms of your work arrangement moving forward, as we hope for a better condition after, say, this month? So the work arrangement, and how are you setting the mindset of your people under that work arrangement?
Okay, thanks, Wilson. I think first of all, I think no one knows for sure is the honest answer, but I can give you a perspective and an opinion. But I think no one knows for sure until things settle down. First thing I would say is that I have a monthly town hall with the whole organization. So all employees could participate in that town hall, where I would give a few minutes of perspective as to what's happening. Some of my board members would also share their perspective of what's happening within their function. And we would leave 30, 45 minutes for Q&A, where any employee can anonymously ask a question. I think this is important for employees to get a feel, because typically the question will be, are we going to go back to the office? Is work from home going to extend? What will we look like? So this question that you're asking now is a rather normal question we get in most of our monthly town halls. So I think giving them that perspective of what is my opinion at that point in time in a sincere, authentic way, while saying that I don't know for sure, but let me give you my point of view as of today, from what I see and from the data that I see. I think that's important para hindi sila mabigla. No? It's not like suddenly there'll be a policy shift that will happen. Now, more specific to your question, how do I see this? Again, I don't know for sure, but my belief is I think 5 days a week working from the office will never be like that again, I think. And I don't know for sure. I would imagine it might be 2 to 3 days at the office for collaboration, for engagement, for brainstorming that is easier when you are physically together, and the balance days where you can effectively work from home still for office-based employees. That's my guess. It may change depending on how experience is. I think we've proven that we can work effectively 100% work from office. We've proven we can work effectively 100% work from home. To get that mix to be hybrid is something we would have to understand in in and master when this is allowed in the future. But my belief is that work from office will not be 5 days a week permanently, even with a vaccine and even when life goes back to normal later on. Of course, my view might change depending on information that might be available when that happens, but that's my view. The second, I think, is that collaboration will become all the more important, both online and both physically. Physically, I think that would be where you might have a whiteboard and you brainstorm together and you be together. I think having that lunch together sometimes is a strong social connection that is very Filipino and very important. These are things that are very hard to do online. And then there are other parts where you don't need to be physically together to be able to be effective. And that I guess for the 2 3 days in a week can be like that. I think what's going for us well in Unilever is that again, like I said, over the last 5 10 years, there's been a strong trust and culture already, where in a board meeting we are typically not complete physically all in the boardroom, even before the pandemic. So it sends a signal that if one or two of us are at home, for any reason, you might have to be in a PTA for your daughter in the afternoon, and therefore in the morning you're just working from home, so you avoid the commute. You might be taking care of a sick family member, etc., etc. That's been something that's been in our in our practice already, even before this pandemic. And therefore, I think that will be going well for us because there's been that trust that ultimately it's all about the output that you deliver and not the physical time you have in the office. When I joined Unilever, by the way, in '94, a small trivia. I was told it was unique back then in '94 until now. Wala kaming bunty clock or time clock to say that you came in at that time at 8 o'clock in the morning, even back in '94. And I think that was quite unique at the time, maybe already a norm now. So just to point out, I think the trust system, that it's all about the output that you deliver and not the time that you put in that matters. So I think that would be some important principles to remember when this pandemic hopefully ends.
Wilson, I'm just curious, how does it compare with SGV culture in the pandemic times?
Okay, we can work from home almost 100%. Although right now we're trying to set the mindset of our people. We try to have what we call Team ABC. So at any point in time, only 1/3 of our people can come to the office again for social distancing, even though we're allowed 50% or even 100%. So we have communicated that to our people, and right now it's being cascaded as well to the different clusters. So we're preparing for it, just in case, because it's hard to call them on them. Some of our people went home to the provinces, so they can work from the provinces. But there will come a time that we'll be back in Metro Manila, the place of work. So we have to tell them, okay, between now and December, it's Christmas time, maybe a period of pregnancy. Sometime maybe come January, they have to be maybe in Metro Manila back again, maybe working from home, as this as defined in our policy. So we're preparing our people as well, just in case. I mean, we have our crisis management team meeting twice a week right now. Before it was almost every day or even twice a day. So yeah.
I think we're all in the same boat in that one.
Yeah.
You posted the next question is from Mr. Bon Moya. I think Bon raised his hand. Yes, Bon.
Yes, thank you very much. Just asking Benji, you did mention this culture of trust, that there's no time in, time out, which is what many of us do. Do you think there's a necessity to formalize that in a framework where you don't now compensate on the basis of hours work or days work? Because we tie other things there as well formally, night differentials, overtime pay, etc. So you think there's a need to now re-examine our basis for remunerating, not on the basis of days work, but on productivity, perhaps?
I think that would be the trend anyways, Bon. So that's been the case for office-based employees, like I shared. There are allowances that I don't know how many charge that. Like there's we had a rule that if you work 4 hours over normal 8 hours, you can charge allowances. But I don't know how many really charge that because we just grew up, I guess, with this practice that you can go in late and go home late. You can go in early and go home early at that time. To your question about remuneration, I do think that should be the trend, that it should be output based. And there are other trends, remuneration of as you progress, diba? So night differentials, allowances, etc. That would be the starting point. As you go up the management ladder, that there's also the part about more variable pay based on output than the fixed pay. That's also another segment that I think HR or the company should be thinking about as well. All really under the premise that you are paid based on output, quality of delivery, rather than time that you put in. And that's something that's been embedded in our company. And I think that different companies will be in different stages within that journey. But I think that will be the trend for anyone, and that has to be formalized depending on what part of the journey companies are in.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have a follow-up,
Thanks,
Bon?
Bon.
Bon, do you have a follow-up?
No, Coco, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks, sir. Rox, I think there's one more question there.
Yes, Coco. I'd like to invite Mr. Hernando Banal. He's Trade Commissioner of the New Zealand Embassy. Hernando, please ask your question.
Yeah, hi Benji. It's nice to see you virtually. Thanks for sharing your leadership journey with Unilever. We understand that Unilever is quite a diversified company. We would like to have a like a feeling on how would you rate Unilever Philippines in terms of a winner or a loser because of the pandemic. You can use the traffic lights as a guide perhaps for us. Thank you.
Okay, I think thanks for the question. I think the first qualifier, because I'm careful about the questions on winners or losers. I think it's for us it's a crisis, and we don't believe there's any winners really in this time. So maybe a bit diplomacy, but just to qualify. But I know what you're asking, and I'll answer your question. But just to be, I guess, sensitive to the term about winners or losers in this time, I think all of us are affected at this time. And it's a crisis that affects everyone. Having said that, where does Unilever stand? I don't know how you define green, amber, or red, but what I can say is that we are fortunate to have categories that are exponentially growing. We do have categories that are also declining relative to where we are, and I think the net impact is where we were in the beginning pre-COVID anyway. So I don't know how you'd qualify that to be green, red, or amber. But it's good to be, I think we are grateful that we are in a situation where we are almost in the same place in financial standing and business-wise from where we are pre-COVID because of the net impact of the portfolio of brands and the portfolio channels. So that would be how we are affected by this. And I just want to add that this would not have been possible if not, again, for the people in the company that are the heroes in the company that put together everything from supply of our basic essentials to demand the launches of new brands and categories that we provided during this time online to be able to serve the communities. If not for that, we would not be better off. We would not be equal to where we are. We would have been worse off than where we are.
Thanks, Ben, for sharing that. We understand now that you keep on innovating in the middle of the pandemic. Thanks.
Do you have a follow-up on that, Mr. Banal?
I think Benji has answered it. Enough. I mean, comprehensively. Thank you.
I actually have a question, but I'll turn it first to Roxanne. Roxanne, you have a poll to share with the audience.
A poll. We're gonna run a poll right now.
I thought you said you had a poll.
Oh, a question. I actually have a question. So pre-COVID, Benjie, Unilever Philippines was active in building partnerships with other companies and LGUs, particularly on social programs, alternative learning, plastic cycling, clean energy programs. Has anything changed in your partnership approach, or are you seeing more opportunities for strategic public-private collaboration at this time?
Thanks, Roxanne. No, nothing has changed. They are all the more important during this time. And if at all we are doing more collaborations now to just pivot to new channels, so digital learning, for example, we are trying to provide digital training for carinderias who are trying to survive. We are providing digital recipes for people who want to use more products or resource products, for example, within their communities that want to get into livelihood programs as well. So the partnerships are all the more important. If at all, there will be some pause because of the lockdown, just because of logistics constraints. But other than that, they are all going. Everything is funded. And I think what I'm proud of is you are tested if you really believe in your purpose, if you still spend for them during a crisis. And we continue to do that, whether it would be a sustainability approach. We just launched, by the way, our Clean Future program, where we talk about we will, by 2030, we will not use fossil fuels based sources, that we will only get this from above the ground. This was just launched a few weeks ago. And this just shows that the commitment is there despite the pandemic and despite the crisis, because we can only be authentic about it if we keep the course, stay the course during this time, rather than shy away from it when the crisis is there. And therefore, it's all the more important to really be authentic in this space.
That's really encouraging to hear that there's still high appetite for
yes.
your programs. Coco, you said you have a question?
Yeah.
Benjie,
just add lang, Roxanne, that we also launched, we also have this commitment on plastic that by 2025 would be 100% either reusable, recyclable plastic that we will be using. And we also launched during the pandemic an ocean plastic source bottle for our Love Beauty Planet variant. So that also happened during the pandemic as well. So just to reiterate the point that we maintain our commitment to this, and all the global commitments we make both on plastics and other sustainability actions that we can make by 2025 and 2030. Sorry, Coco, you're going to ask a question.
Yes, Coco.
Sorry, Rox, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yes. So does that mean you still invest heavily on R&D?
Yes, that continues. R&D investment continues. In fact, the budgets we're looking for next year is even higher than this year because of the new categories that we see that are important. So R&D remains the investment that we want to put in, as well as the sustainability actions, the budgets that we have for that to finance our sustainability projects.
That's great. And so innovation doesn't end. That's great. Coco, I'm so sorry.
No problem. I'd like to go back to a topic that you were talking about earlier about mental health of employees. Could you tell us a bit, I don't know how to describe this, how much more issue do you have in the mental health area because of the pandemic, and then how are you addressing it specifically?
Okay, thanks, Coco. That's it's a topic that's close to my heart actually. We just launched our mental health month last week with our employees. Actually, it's great. I think the first point I want to make is that my first priority or the first step for me is making sure that employees feel that Unilever Philippines is a safe space for employees to share mental health issues. That is the very first priority that I have before the solutions, because we've learned that when we offer the solutions, but employees feel that, oh, I might be disadvantaged if I share that I might have a mental health issue, or I might be seen as a non-performer if I share that. They will not avail of the services anyway. So over the last, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around the last 3 years, we would have had these programs every year, where thankfully we have courageous employees who were willing to share in a panel to share their mental health struggles. So these were real managers, directors, employees in a panel sharing their mental health struggles. And what we've seen is that over the years, because we've had this session, more and more have been open because they realize that if we share this, we are not seen as disadvantaged or non-performers. We accept this as the same way. If you had the flu, you take a medicine. If you have a headache, you take a medicine. If you have mental health issues, you take treatments. And then you can go back to doing what you do well. We provide people with days off when they need to be able to have the mental health break as properly diagnosed. So the first step really for me, Coco, is to help provide an environment where people feel that it is safe for them to share that they have a mental health issue. So that's the first one. Now, I wouldn't say that we're there yet, but I do see trend of more and more people sharing with their line managers that they have a mental health issue. And there could be different spaces for that, whether it's bipolar, ADHD, etc., etc. So next to that would be providing avenues for solution. So we've had, again, even before the pandemic, psychiatrists that come to the office some days in the week where people can anonymously book a schedule and see the psychiatrist. Later on, we converted that to online psychiatrists during the pandemic. Even I had a session just to understand better as well and just be able to have a professional talk to me as well during this time. And just to show our employee base that it's okay. Um, so I think the first step, as I said, is a safe space, and we call it Safe Space October for our mental health month this month. And the next step would be to provide solutions. Are they increasing? We do have surveys every month to check the well-being of our employees. So we do, I won't quote a number, but we do see a number of them affected, but the number goes up and down sometimes. And I think it would be partly dependent on personal circumstance as well. If you have a family member who is affected, if you have a family member who may have lost their job, if you have a family member who might have been sick, prolonged, or otherwise, or hospitalized, or unfortunately pass away. So we do see that going up and down, and we do try to tailor programs both on a one-on-one basis and at a company basis. Just to share a few of the programs that we've initiated during the pandemic, as I shared about things that we were doing even before. Number one, we had the meetings manifesto during the pandemic that we put together. We said, just to explicitly say, when you're online, it's up to you if you want your video on or video off. It's okay, there's no judgment. There's no problem if a dog suddenly barks or a child suddenly cries beside you in the meeting. That's no problem, we accept that. Let's try to avoid 12 to 1 lunch meetings. It was bad enough before when it's at the office. It's even worse when you have an opportunity to be with the family during lunchtime. For most functions, we limit the meeting time to 9 to 5 so that it doesn't extend till 10 p.m., 7 p.m., 11 p.m. Of course, by exception and by crisis, it may happen. If someone is sick that you have to provide for support, those are examples. So that could be an exception. But by and large, 90% of the meetings would be 9 to 5. We publicly say that so that people can all see that it is something that is important to us. And therefore, that is one support that was highly appreciated in our survey. Yesterday was a day of thanks for us. It was a global day of thanks, where we said just spend the day and not work yesterday, October 5. And we said no emails, no WhatsApp, no Vibers, no texts. Just one day for all of us to detox from each other. It has been quite stressful over the past many months, and we understand that. So we provide the global day of thanks yesterday to provide for that. We have also what we call Unplugged Fridays. Different functions choose a Friday afternoon where they're unplugged. Within that afternoon, 12 to 5, no meetings, so that you can do what you need to do during that Friday afternoon as well. So different initiatives that we done. And nothing came from the board directors. These were people suggesting. When people said, oh no, meetings, you can do this and that, I said, why don't you put up a manifesto, get 2 or 3 people from this function and propose to us in 2 weeks. And they came to us with a meeting manifesto. I said, okay, fine, let's do it. And they said, really? We'll do it? Yeah, I have a town hall next week. I'll share this. These are the 10 rules within the meeting manifesto. We'll do it. And they said, wow, just like that? I said, yeah, just like that. It's a good idea. Thank you for that. So the trust in the grassroots really has been amazing. A lot of heroic frontliners and employees have really surfaced during this time, Coco. But yeah, just on the point of mental health and well-being, those were some of the things that we did that maybe other companies might want to consider. Unplugged Friday afternoons, Day of Thanks, and our meeting manifesto, among other things.
Can you repeat again? Day of Thanks is no communications?
So Day of Thanks was yesterday, October 5, where we said just spend one day not to work, spend it with your family, for yourself. No emails, no WhatsApp, no texts. So just one day that you will not get a text or an email from anyone. And it was our global day of thanks yesterday. Unplugged Fridays is just no meetings. Of course, you could be working, but just no meetings 12 to 5, one Friday in a month. different functions have different Fridays. We're trying to coordinate to the same Friday, but we couldn't lock it in. But just that time so that you're not stuck in. Otherwise, 9 to 5 could be all meetings, as you know.
The Global Day of Thanks sounds like a dream to me personally, but I suspect people who run organizations must be wondering how the hell will the organization run without communication for one day?
It's one day, Coco. The world will not end in one day.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. And the fact that you're still here today, I guess, proves the point. I'm going to go to the last question, but before I go that, Roxanne, you have a survey, you have a poll, because you mentioned a survey, Benjie.
We are posting a poll question in the chat box right now. Sophia, please. I can relate to Mr. Seferino. I can imagine the flooded emails. All right. Our question is 8 months into COVID. It's already been 8 months. Which area remains to be the biggest challenge for your company? Please type in the letter. A is managing workforce, B, managing disrupted supply chain and operations, C, reviving and creating demand, D, maintaining liquidity, or E, creating new partnerships or business opportunities. If you notice, Benjie, we copied your criteria.
Yeah, the 5 pillars.
I guess you can also write multiple letters if you want. And while you're answering,
do all.
There you go. You can do all. And while you're answering that, or no, I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer that, actually.
A seems to be the overwhelming response here. A and C, reviving the demand, right? And managing people, and creating partnerships.
Benjie, don't answer yet, no. But the last question I'll ask you is really, what's your biggest or most surprising takeaway from this COVID experience? But don't answer that yet. We'll give these. I think the answers are more or less. And then could I now ask?
A and C.
Rox, are you going to summarize that, or it looks like a lot of A's, right?
There's a lot of A and C, which is companies right now seems to be focused on managing their workforce. The biggest challenge is managing the workforce and creating or reviving the demand.
We'll include the results of this very scientific survey in the thank you note that we're going to send to all the attendees in the next couple of days. Before I go to that last question, could I ask everybody who's in the room for your feedback on this? And you can do that by aiming your camera at the QR code that we're flashing on your screen now. We'd really appreciate your feedback on this. Also, any feedback you give, please note that we might use it in our publications or in our website or social media. If you can't get that QR code, we'll also post the link in the chat box. There. So either way, we'd appreciate your feedback on today's event. Benjie, I think we've all had great takeaways from this experience. I'd like to ask you, what's the biggest takeaway for you, and maybe to the extent of what's the most surprising thing you've learned during this experience?
Okay, I love this question, and I think it's something I've reflected on over the past few months, Coco. And I think I have a clear answer in my mind after reflecting on this in the past few months, actually. The most surprising takeaway for me, really, was that miracles can happen when you let go, when you trust people, within a framework. I'm an engineer in university. I graduated, so everything's very scientific for me and very logical. And I can be a control freak sometimes. But in this pandemic, especially the first 2-3 months, it was impossible to micromanage. And it was just all we could do was to say in that, again, first 2-3 months, this is what needs to happen. These are the guardrails. You decide how you want to do it. Don't even update me. Just let me know when it's done or if you need any help. What help can we give? So I think the kind of letting go within a framework with a clear objective and a clear guideline, what you're going for, can really work miracles, and people love it. I love it. I have almost no minimal interaction with my boss from London. We would engage for 30 minutes every month, and that's it. Just to and half the time he's checking how I'm doing, how my family's doing actually. But that kind of clarity and empowerment can really work miracles. And while we talk about that, honestly, even to be able to see that in action was really very fulfilling for me. To see the kind of heroic actions everyone in the company was able to do across all functions, with no one exempted, um, is something that is really very fulfilling for me. Something that I'm quite proud of, and something that I'm sure all other companies within this call would have seen within your employee base as well.
Thanks very much, Benjie. I think many of us share that reflection. Thanks for putting it so articulately. And thank you for the great presentation today, Benjie, and the great conversation. I'd like to thank Benjie again, Wilson for their opening remarks, to our partner, Microsoft, and thank you to all of the members and guests who attended today's session. We really appreciate your presence today and your feedback as well. Our next speaker for the next session is Cesar Romero, President and CEO of Filipina Shell. That's going to be on November the 4th. If you haven't registered yet, please mark your calendars and save the date. That will be the 4th session. There's going to be 2 more after that in December and in January. Again, thank you very much, Benjie.
Thank you for having me, Coco. It's an honor.
Thank you, and
I also want to thank Lou Ortiz, who helped me put together the presentation as well today.
Thank you, Lou. Lou, it's been a pleasure to work with you. I say that on behalf of my colleagues as well. Good day to all of you. We look forward to seeing you again in our future events. Thank you, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coco. Thanks,
Thank you so
Benjie.
much. Thank you.